Right, we're good to go. Cool. So I use this time also, explain really quickly what is Kök Projekt and what is Agri-Food Connect, and also this is going to be a repetition for a lot of people who are watching the videos beforehand or joining to our webinars. But I always like to use this time to explain what we're working on. What is Agri-Food Connect? So basically, in a traditional sense, we are an accelerator and a corporate innovation partner for agriculture, food, and water sectors. What we do is that we work together with governmental organizations, companies, and time to time entrepreneurship NGOs to develop acceleration programs and corporate innovation programs. We cover all of these steps of the food value chain, from seed to the plate, from soil to the shelf. So basically all of these steps and verticals are part of our work, where we develop all of these entrepreneurship programs and acceleration programs. We work together with startups and helping them to reach their potential and beyond. So with the key overused word with the new normal, we realized the shift in the agri-food sector is quite vibrant, and we are moving into a quite interesting experience regarding the food and agriculture sector. So that gave us the idea and the opportunity to start working on building a global conversation around the world with our local partners to understand how are the agri-food companies or the startups are adapting to the crisis, and how are the ecosystems actually reacting to that. So with that, we started off with our first series of webinars. This is actually our 11th, and today we have Vivian with us from FoodTechies. We will be diving into to the Finnish ecosystem. But what the Agri-Food Connect has on the continuation is that after the webinars, we will be moving into an online sprint, where we will be working together with the companies and also with the startups to help them understand and adapt their products and solutions directly to those companies' value chain. On the next step, we will be working together with the selected startups on an agile mentorship program, where we will be working on their products, their services, their teams, and portfolio. And in the last step of it, we will be organizing a pre-acceleration program with the selected startups, where the idea of that program is to adapt directly their products and services into those companies' value chain to adapt to the new normal. Since we are talking about changing, consumption habits, production habits, this will also change the appearance, the interest, and also the products and services of those startups. So the Agri-Food Connect aims to provide that opportunity for startups and companies to understand how they can adapt to the new normal. If you would like to know more about, Kök Projekt, Agri-Food Connect, or any of the stuff that we do, you can log into our website, which is kökprojekt.com. You can register to our newsletter and get to know all of these events and reports and other cool stuff that we do. And also, if you would like to, you can join into our digital community, which is the Kök community. It's a Slack-based community, free to join, and it hosts a lot of, startup representatives, sector representatives all across the world, and you can just, get in touch and meet with them. So that's also gives you the opportunity to be part of the global conversation around the food and agriculture sector. So that being said, today, as part of our webinar series, which is the Agri-Food Connect, we have Vivian Long with us. She is the co-founder of FoodTechies Finland. And today we will be diving into the Finnish agri-food ecosystem. So Vivian, thank you so much for joining us today. So tell us about, FoodTechies and your work and your experience with the Finnish agri-food ecosystem. So thank you for joining in.
Yes, and thank you, Semi, for having me. Happy to be here. Well, obviously, FoodTechies Finland is a food tech startup ecosystem doing things that are quite similar to what the Kök Projekt is doing, except we are based in Tampere, Finland. I've lived in this town for about 5 years. It's 2.5 hours north of Helsinki, even though it's only 240,000 people. Miraculously, we've managed to create like a really thriving startup culture, at least around the tech and the gaming and all those industries. And so we wanted to do kind of the same thing for the food tech community. And of course, our aim is not only to unite the different players in the food industry, but also bring kind of the same open, lean, innovative startup culture that Tampere has created, and also bring that to the rest of the world as well. As for my role, basically, of course, I am the chairman of the FoodTechies Finland Association, so that's quite natural. And I'm just trying to get projects started here, trying to get people interested in food tech, and thinking about, hey, why don't you consider doing a startup in food tech? It's the future.
Excellent. And since we're diving in slowly, could you tell us about more, the Finnish agri-food ecosystem, the approach to the food tech, and also how's the interest in the Finnish startup ecosystem?
Okay, lots of good questions. Let's maybe start with maybe the agricultural climate. So Finland is one of the most northernmost agricultural countries, quite possibly the most northernmost. Norway is primarily into fishing, and Sweden does have some agriculture, but for example, because of the Gulf Stream that comes through Finland, it's surprisingly 4 to 6 degrees warmer than what the temperature should be, which has allowed for a much larger agricultural industry than maybe what would normally be in such a northern climate. And so, of course, it also has a really short growing season. That results obviously in a lower yield than the rest of the other European countries. Of course, I think that comes with some benefits too, because of the longer, colder winters, and hopefully they'll stay that way, depending on what happens with climate change. This actually results in less pests and therefore a need to use less pesticides. And impressively enough, Finland is one of the largest producers of oats in the world. It's one of the top 5 global players, and if you actually look at the list of the top 5 oat producers, and look at the size of Finland, that's actually quite impressive, because the top 2 are Canada and Russia, and they are significantly bigger than Finland. So another interesting thing that maybe kind of compensates for the shorter growing season is we have much longer summer days. We're coming up to 24-hour sunlight soon, which actually has a very interesting effect on some crops. For example, the potato in the northern Lapland, because the potato gets 24 hours of sun during the summer, it results in a different flavored potato. So some interesting things can happen there.
Never thought about it.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, another interesting thing is that for Finnish people, because I think they're so in touch with the nature, agriculture and forestry go hand in hand, because they have, Finland has a lot of forests.
Right.
And so, the funny thing is that if you look up that department, it's not Department of Agriculture and Department of Forestry separate, they're together.
Right.
So, yeah. And of course, in terms of crops that they grow crops that are typically best for, northern climates. So wheat, oats, rye, barley, root vegetables. And of course, also Finland is quite well known for its high quality food safety and food standards. So much actually, in fact, that Asian people trust Finnish pork more than they do the pork that's grown locally. One local Finnish producer of pork said that Japanese people, at least pre-COVID-19, were ordering his pork for sushi production. So they were flying the pork all the way over to Japan and then prepping it and then eating it, which even I haven't done.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive and bold for sure. Wow, okay.
Yeah, it's quite a bit. Even Finnish people don't eat raw pork yet. But apparently international people have more confidence in Finnish pork than Finnish people do.
I guess. But that is so interesting. Like, I never thought about it that, because when you're talking about agriculture and having sun for 24 hours a day, that creates a different opportunity for growing different products, but it's also the different flavors within those products, and that also creates a pretty interesting consumption habits as well, I guess. I remember that we were mentioning in our previous discussions regarding the situation with the butter, if I'm not mistaken, like the French butter, the Finnish butter.
That interesting thing. We also, of course, Finnish people also have quite a large dairy industry. I don't know how they compare in global production, but I just know that the dairy consumption is very high. Right. In Finland. But we have very good reputation for at least high quality dairy products in Russia. So during the time with when that chaos was going on, and there was the UN sanctions, and then Finland had to basically cut off butter, all of their sales to Russia. Then Valio, the company, the main dairy company here, lost a lot of its market to Russia. And then of course, then the Russians started to drive over the border to Finland and pick up like vanfuls of butter and other similar dairy products. But yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I'm not sure how I'm not exactly sure what is about the butter that Russians love. I think it tastes quite good to me, for sure. I definitely will have to maybe ask maybe some Russian people when they're picking up their cartloads one day. But yeah, when that happens, you know, Valio, the company who produces the butter, had to find a new market, and they luckily were able to find new markets, and one of those especially was France, where they were able to sell it as a good butter to make croissants. So, which is quite impressive, because French people really love their croissants. So
absolutely, and that was also probably during the time of that, you know, butter crisis, with there's not enough butter to you know, produce all of these croissants for the country.
Exactly.
So, but like if we you know, slowly moving towards to the ecosystem, you know, approach with the food tech, and also as you mentioned, you know, the innovation is one of the key points that, you know, you guys working on in FoodTechies. So can you tell us a bit more like the approach in food tech in Finland?
I guess it's kind of tricky right now. I think what we're trying to do is we all right now in Finland, we all know that food tech is the future. It's just bringing those players together to cooperate. It's trying to convince the corporates that they should work with startups. It's helping those startups transition, and that's kind of what we're working on right now. Because I think for the longest time, especially in Finland, it's kind of like the food industry and the tech industry have been considered very separate. I mean, if you're a programmer, you build apps. If you're a chef, you start a restaurant. And I guess maybe like chefs have never thought about using technology to build their business, and you know, and you know, the gamers and the computer guys, I mean, there's so many different areas they can go into, so they've never really thought about going into food. So we're kind of working on that. I would say that's kind of a weakness in the food tech ecosystem right now. We're all kind of working hard to get that going. There's lots of new initiatives happening. EIT FAN is right now in Helsinki supporting, and they've recently actually started this new program called Food and Beyond.eu. So lots of initiatives going on. I know the city of Tampere is really kind of pushing, trying to get into the food tech industry as well. And in terms of, I think what Finnish people maybe do well in the food tech area, actually a lot of good research is being done at the universities in plant and meat genetics. And also there have been actually quite a few Finnish innovations in the plant-based protein sector. A couple of products I can name off the top of my head is pulled oats. By Green and Gold, called Nyttokaura in Finnish, and also there's a broad bean-based plant-based substitute called Hartkis, which actually just recently has made their entryway into Japan. So if you type in Hartkis Finland Japan or hartkis.jp, you'll actually see a line of products based on Finnish broad bean.
So you said the plant-based protein is one of the, you know, the trend topics in Finland, you know, ecosystem, right?
Yeah, it's definitely a trending topic. A lot of innovations being done around this plant-based protein area. There is a broad bean ice cream that was released. They have like all sorts of, if you're a vegetarian or a vegan, actually, it's not too difficult to do that in Finland. And also, Valio has also created this milk-based protein, which is not a plant-based protein, but again, another meat alternative, basically. I say plant-based proteins, but we're also, I guess, you know, doing dairy-based proteins too. And also, I think one of the most interesting startups coming out of Finland that's actually already gained some worldwide notoriety is Solar Foods, because they make this protein powder called Solein, and it's made out of thin air.
Yeah, so could you elaborate on that a little bit? I think that's one of the most fascinating things, you know, I've heard for a while regarding the alternative protein subject.
Okay, well, I mean, I'm not a good person to get onto the science and chemistry of it. Probably the CEO or co-founder is, but from what I understand with the story, the CEO actually was doing work in renewable energies, and he actually discovered that that even if they replaced all of the world's energy sources with renewable energy, it would not be enough. That a lot of the CO2 emissions, 25% of them come from food, and that was kind of where he started his journey into food tech. And he discovered this very, I guess, simple process. I can't remember what exactly it is, using air and some other fancy process to basically that made this protein powder that was very nutritious. And this solein powder, if you Google solar foods pistafi later on, you'll see it's just this yellow powder, and it's got a neutral flavor, and you basically can just put it into whatever food you like to get that nutrient substitute. And there are basically, the idea is that now that you no longer have to grow food, you can just produce it in a lab. That helps to reduce the carbon footprint significantly, and of course shortens the time for production, and also shortens the supply chain as well. So very interesting, and definitely I think a startup worth following and checking out, and seeing their roadmap. So.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's one of the, the fascinating things I've heard for a while, and, it's literally out of thin air producing protein, and it's just definitely exciting. So if we move in, slowly to the work of FoodTechies, I mean, I know that you guys are working on like hackathons and similar events. So basically building the ecosystem for Finland that, creates the focus on the food entrepreneurship and food tech entrepreneurship. So can you tell us a bit more about the food tech hackathon that you worked on, and also what was the I would say the outcomes, the outputs that, or also the the experience that you had regarding the ecosystem?
Okay, so I mean, we've been kind of piloting different ideas so far, and we noticed, I think, the one key thing that kind of people loved about the different events that we pilot, whether they succeeded or failed or not, was they loved the sense of community. They loved the sense of people coming together and just somehow just discussing all these different topics and interesting things about our food system, our food chain, and even having controversial discussions, especially between, vegetarians and meat eaters and stuff like that. And surprisingly enough, those two factions actually were surprisingly getting along. So I think that was when we did our first hackathon in November. We're like, okay, we want to keep that community going. And then of course COVID-19 hit, and we're like, oh no, what are we going to do? No more in-person events. But this is the important thing about being a startup and doing lean thinking and stuff like that. You have to think opportunity. And so that's why for this next hackathon, we are doing an online hackathon. And we are kind of thinking about the positive things, and we're just trying to think, how can we bring that sense of community that we feel in a physical hackathon to this next hackathon. And we're trying to think, okay, let's see how we can implement the technologies. Let's study how these previous online hackathons went, and so forth. So for us, the key is definitely in the community, and it's all about just learning by doing. It's about daring to fail, not all the time, but of course being willing to take that risk, and just being open to different ideas and embracing different philosophies. And you know what, so far, even in just building the hackathon, it's amazing how the community has come together. I actually didn't, me and my co-founder, we were just a team of two, but we kind of reached out to the internet globally to everyone and said, who's interested in planning a food tech hackathon? And before that, we knew it, we had our core team. And I've already, I haven't even advertised that much, and I've already gotten volunteers saying, hey, can I volunteer for your hackathon? So I think it's I think it's just amazing what you can do if you just have an idea and you put your mind to it, and you can just visualize it for people, so it makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, just like comes back to one of my favorite quotes from the movie called the Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. I love that quote. It's just like similar, with your activities, that you're building that platform for Finland, and then having entrepreneurs to come. So that's the entrepreneurship side of it. But how is because since also you're in touch with governmental organizations, you're in touch with you're reaching out to corporates as well. How is the attitude regarding Finland when we look into, the corporate side of it and also the governmental side of it?
Mm. I think this has to do largely with Finnish culture, but I think it's like when we reach out to them, they're interested and they're fascinated and they're excited about the idea, but they're also a bit hesitant. That's always the way it is with corporates and governments. But I think they will come around to the idea. My experience has always been like, regardless of what country you're in, you just have to be patient because these bigger corporations and government organizations, they're spending public money. They have to be careful. They have to be responsible about it. Corporates also maybe they're spending public investors' money and they have to be accountable to, and they don't want to take risk. It's harder for them to fail. But I think that's the beauty of having an ecosystem and being a startup, is that you can do those things that those governments and those corporations maybe are not allowed to do or can't do for whatever reason.
Definitely, that's the initiative side of it, right? I mean, that's basically what makes a startup rather than just being part of a corporate ecosystem.
Yeah.
But you also touch base with the issues of food safety as well, which is quite important in Finland, as you mentioned. So how's the relationship between the startups and the food security, food safety, and all of those topics? Is it becoming more and more aware with the crisis, or how the startups are adapting to the crisis? How is the whole process of adaptation going so far in Finland?
I think generally speaking, in terms of food safety in Finland, they are quite good in terms of their standards. They're quite strict. Finnish people definitely follow, most of the time they follow the rules. Right. So in terms of having, I think, like, for example, issues with that, there hasn't been that. I think more the fear, and much like what everyone else has, there was this initial wave of food insecurity, like people not worrying that they would have enough food. And so it really altered the buying behavior of Finnish people initially. Right. So whereas before the COVID-19 hit, plant-based foods and all of these alternative types of food were really popular and really trendy, and people were kind of stepping out of the box. When the crisis happened, people went really straight back to kind of the old way of practicing. They were buying tons of ground beef. They were buying tons of bread. They were buying tons of dairy. Those plant-based foods were just sitting on the shelves and kind of stuff. But hopefully I'm seeing maybe less of that issue as people realize that, okay, our supply chain is going to keep that in. That people are just panicking less about the food security. That being said, of course, the farmers are worried about the time to come because, like many other countries, there is going to be a labor shortage because, for example, Finland imports quite a few workers during the berry picking season to harvest those berries, and it was very much a win-win situation because it was a very good wage for the foreign workers, and so they're happy to do it. But of course, now that they can't come in because of COVID-19, there's that fear that they won't be harvested. And also, of course, farmers also needed those laborers to harvest on the farm as well. Trying to think of more creative ways to do that, maybe get more Finnish people, especially summer students, to take on those jobs. But of course, at the end of the day, Finland is a small country, 5.3 million people. Right. Unlikely that we'll have to think of some more solutions to get sufficient labor.
Right.
I think one of the reasons maybe in terms of food safety or food security that it has been less of an issue in Finland is because of this. There's this organization called Huoltovarmuuskeskus, basically the National Emergency Supply. It's been around actually since World War II, and it's been there as a just in case another world war happens or Russia attacks or something. And actually, ironically, Sweden and the other Scandinavian countries got rid of it, but Finland has always kept it. So when the crisis hit, we at least had this supply room that the whole nation was keeping in order to make sure that we had enough stocks of medical supplies, of food, and all those other essential things. And the nice thing about also having this this policy or this emergency safety stock, I guess you could say, in place, was that it also the grocers and the food suppliers, it made them run their business a bit differently than maybe in other places, because many grocery stores prior to COVID-19 were practicing kind of just in time, like, because demand for food is generally quite steady, or it relies on very steady demand. And so though you normally would not keep safety stock, but because they have this government international safety stock in place that kind of says to the Finnish businesses, you need to keep the safety stock and we'll subsidize you for it. These grocery stores were keeping that safety stock, and that really helped with the food safety and the food security.
Interesting. I mean, that's also coming with the fact, I mean, that's really interesting. And also, as you mentioned, you know, all I think one of the, you know, the greatest cultures in Finland is that, you know, the harvesting culture, the wild harvesting, you know, having that culture of going, you know, collecting mushrooms, collecting berries and all that stuff. So it's not really that, you know, foreign to, as you mentioned, you know, the summer students going out to the fields and collecting, and that could be a solution. I remember Matthias in our previous webinars, Matthias Schmidt-Rex, he's the CEO of Smart Hectare Innovation, was mentioning about the same thing for the asparagus, because of the asparagus season has arrived, but there's not enough, you know, people to actually collect them. So they're actually allowing the borders to have, you know, foreign workers to come in to collect those asparagus, which is not the same case for the other products. So this kind of like a situation also creates a lot of opportunities for, I mean, integration, economical integration as well, I guess. I wanted to, you know, slowly moving forward to the actually your perspective, you know, in this, you know, in this section on our webinars. So basically, you know, I know that you're mentioning a lot about, you know, the food tech innovation, you know, food techies and all these food hackathon. What is your thoughts on the future of food? How do you envision the future of, you know, food sector, agriculture sector? Is there any like top topics that is like most interesting to you, or any of the examples that you would like to talk about?
It's of course, there's just so many interesting things happening in food tech. I think I'm definitely gravitating more towards an interest in agri-tech. There's just a very interesting culture, especially with the farmers, I think, in tradition, and it'd be interesting to maybe I like a challenge, maybe. So it'd be interested to try and convince them or work with them to come up with solutions for that, especially for that industry. So I really see, I think in the future, and this is what I've also been seeing kind of online when I look at food tech, a real focus on the agri-tech. People are really thinking more about the agriculture. And of course, you know, it's always interesting because we always are talking about the new normal. So we don't know what's going to happen. So I think we'll probably do a big swing one way or a big swing the other way. There is a possibility that, you know, because of this whole COVID-19, that we might return to maybe our old ways or the bad ways, you know, return to what's comfortable for us, to return to the systems that are comfortable for us, and then just continue to be extremely wasteful and resource intensive. I hope it doesn't come to that, but I'm hoping, and this is kind of what I'm pushing for, especially with these hackathons and these events, through education, that we can kind of teach people that, hey, we need to start moving toward different solutions. We need to start really looking at our supply chain, our relationship with food. We need to think about how we can bring, for example, quality back to our food again, like give it that high nutritional content, because, you know, when it comes to farming, the way it's been structured is, and you can't blame farmers, it's always been quantity over quality. Right. So of course you're going to chug out a low quality product if that's the way the system is set up, or incentivizes you. I think I see definitely a movement more towards e-commerce. I know especially one startup here in Finland, Kotitila.fi, has seen crazy amounts of growth, over 4,000% in sales. Wow. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, basically, of course, when all of the restaurants were shut down, the farmers lost a lot of business, and ergo they had to find a new market. And so they turned to, luckily, what had existed at the time, this e-commerce platform. So now they're experiencing rapid growth because of that. The question becomes, will that remain, or will people just go back to their old way of thinking? I think it's not so much what I think was going to happen, because that's hard to say. I think it's more like what I would like to happen.
Right, of course.
Yeah, and that's just seeing businesses really kind of adapt and change their business model to make it more resilient, and their supply chains more resilient to these constant fluctuations and changes. I mean, another example I could give, for example, during COVID-19, there was this catering company. Their whole job was providing waiters for events.
Okay.
So you can imagine that they totally lost all their business, but they adapted actually quite quickly. And I think within a month or two after doing a hackathon, they developed a new concept, and they're like, okay, we're going to go deliver lunches to people. We're going to be we're going to be a food delivery company now.
Did it work for them? Or is it still in the adaptation phase?
I think it's working, put it that way. Their primary goal is to get jobs for those previously laid off waiters, and now they have jobs, and so they're starting to get back on, and those waiters are now driving trucks instead of moving drinks around. So I think it's a success. It's a success story in the making, let's say.
Definitely, I would agree. Since we're talking about agri-tech, one of the trend topics regarding agriculture is that urban farming. How big is urban farming, or the urban farming startups in Finland? Is there any interest on the ecosystem or the governmental side of it? Like, how's the approach on this?
I think there's definitely interest. I think it's definitely growing here.
Right.
There is actually an urban farm lab in the city of Vantaa dedicated to just urban farming, and they're having the students there go in and experiment and do all kinds of things. They're growing crickets, they're growing this, seeing what can be done. And they the city of Vantaa, which is actually located right next to the airport, has really taken this project quite seriously. I'm also seeing some other initiatives within the city of Tampere of the government offering grants for these urban farming solutions. So I think it's definitely quite big, and it's here to stay. And especially with Finland, I think it's a good solution. And the reason being is because, as I said before, agriculture and forestry are quite intertwined in Finland, and they really value and appreciate their forests. And they also, as you said, or as you know, see it as a source of food as well. So they don't want to plow down the forest to make way for more farmland.
Of course. One of the topics when we talk about, since we're talking a lot about adaptations, changes, and in agriculture, I wanted to move a bit towards to the food side of it as well. And when you look at the adaptations regarding the pandemic, there's a rise in the contactless production. There's a rise in food delivery in some parts, in CPG, and basically looking into more on the functional foods as well. One of the topics that we discussed, in a previous webinar with Alessio D'Antonio from Forward Fooding, he mentioned that the food delivery, for example, in UK takes the huge chunk of the whole ecosystem. So, regarding all of these, sectors like food delivery, contactless food, and also this novel approaches with the serving of those startups, is there, any examples you would like to give as well on this? Like, how's the approach on food delivery or the other services?
Yeah, that's an interesting topic, I think, especially in Finland. Right now, with the COVID-19 situation, a lot of businesses, they want to do the food delivery, but because Finland is much more spread out than other countries, it's not really that feasible. It's quite expensive to deliver food to those outlying areas, so it's something is feasible in Helsinki, and that's where most of the food delivery startups are.
Right.
But not so feasible in other areas. Like, for example, so there's Wolt, which is the Finnish, basically a Finnish food delivery company, very similar to DoorDash and Skip the Dinner and Uber Eats. like, you hire, they contract out the food delivery people.
Right.
To this very day. And they're a very successful startup, and they've gone international and everything like that. They still do not offer delivery to my neighborhood. So to this very day, only to the very city center of Tampere.
Right.
So I think food delivery in that sense is very tricky for Finland. I'm not sure I see a huge potential for it, because the problem is that most of the Finnish people still live in the countryside. And I think because of COVID-19, they might continue to live in the countryside, which means, food delivery, like 1 hour outside the city from one restaurant to another, not feasible. It will have to always be like bulk orders and stuff like that. And of course, I think there are inventing new concepts in that sense. Finland, for example, has what they call these Reiko circles, which is kind of where they just get on Facebook, and the farmers say we have these products, and everyone pre-orders 2 weeks in advance, and they just come to that spot and then pick up all their goods, so that it's a little bit less of a carbon footprint. But it's I'm probably not a great solution for Finland in terms of trying to deliver food in a sustainable way.
So I would say, so not the food delivery, but the product delivery would be more interesting case when you talk about. But I didn't know it was that much dispersed all across, and it's not really feasible considering the systematic themes of those cities, as I understand. Awesome. There's a question from our attendees. So Didam is asking, who would you cluster the ecosystem in Finland with from a food industry growth and entrepreneurial behaviors point of view, neighboring countries else?
Food tech. Who would I group them together with? Probably right now, probably with our Scandinavian brothers and sisters. So we have very similar climates, very similar way of thinking. I wouldn't be surprised if Sweden and Denmark or Norway are kind of doing kind of similar things to us, maybe with slightly different products. There is this product called Oatly, which it feels like it should be a Finnish product, but it is actually a Swedish product, and it's oat milk. So if I was to group them in with any other country, that would be the one. Those would be the one. Sorry.
Excellent. Is there any sort of like a cooperation between the Scandinavian countries as such? Because I know that there's a food cluster in Denmark, but I'm not aware in the other countries. Or is there any sort of like a cooperation between regarding the food and agriculture, startup or sector ecosystem?
I don't think there is yet between the startup ecosystems. We are working on it though.
Right. Awesome. I think, just a sec. Yeah. That covers all my questions, but I would like to in the last bit, I know that you guys are working on new events and other activities. So would you like to, talk about that? What's the agenda with the upcoming times and the months regarding, the food techies in Finland?
I think we have several projects on the go, and it could be changing at any moment. Of course, as we mentioned earlier, the biggest event coming is the online hackathon, June 26th to 28th, and everyone is welcome to join, even international participants. I think, and if you're worried I don't have any skills or that sort of stuff, I think some of the solar foods, that whole team, I think they didn't originally even have a food tech based background before they entered food tech. Right. So don't underestimate what you can do if you're interested in the field. What the plan basically is on. I've already opened up a Discord community for people to join if you're just an individual and want to look for a team. So you can use that Discord community to get to know people, maybe just talk about food, talk about different issues. And then on June 12th, we're going to have a community kickoff event to start some networking. And we're going to do and we're just going to have a series of online networking events to help you find teams. Or if you're a startup already with a team and you need maybe an extra teammate, find a suitable teammate, maybe just discuss the problem, discuss the ideas, and do some brainstorming. And then, and of course, those are all completely optional events to attend or not to attend. And then, of course, we'll have the hackathon or sprint June 26th to 28th. And of course, the interesting thing about doing this online food tech hackathon is that, for example, previously, if you look at food tech hackathons, they usually had an industrial kitchen. Now we don't have that because it's an online hackathon. And of course, most online hackathons or most hackathons in general are primarily coding. So this hackathon, in a sense, is a little bit like an ideathon. It's to get the idea started. And it's just, this hackathon is only the beginning. It's kind of like the boost or the introduction, like welcome to the world of food tech, and hey, you've got a really cool idea, let's try it. Nice. So from that hackathon, where we'll be continuing to grow the community, develop new events, probably doing some type of incubator or pre-accelerator events to help boost and provide people with the resources they need to build startups. And of course, another upcoming project that's still in the works and nothing is final, but of course we're looking to create a startup kitchen. And that would be a place to bring the chefs together, to bring the food startups who have a product together and the farmers together, again, to innovate and co-create. And hopefully that will go through. We'll see what happens with COVID-19. So
that sounds really exciting. I mean, that's one of the great things to create a collaboration with him, because when you talk about, building new products and new ideas, you need to talk about the new tastes, new textures, and new interests, and also the shift that the preferences, which is, I think, I'm not sure there's enough studies on that yet, but I mean, considering the fact that over the last, 3 months, the change in consumption habits, I guess, leaning towards to consuming more sugar, more fatty products, and snacking and all that will maybe gradually, go down with the new normal, but that could also stay as a habit, and we might look into more healthy versions of snacks and healthy versions of all of these, functional foods. One of the great topics that I remember was that, how you can create a functional snack that would help you concentrate, but in the meantime, you enjoy yourselves and consider that that's like a snack, just like chips or chocolate or whatever you like to prefer in the snacking time. So that sounds really excellent and exciting, and bringing the farmers into the picture, that also, creates the opportunity to talk about the changing products as well. And I'm still, taking like keynotes, in our conversation, is that, having 24 hours sun changes the aroma and the flavor of those potatoes, and that would also create a different, version of chips, would have, different tasting profile as well. So that's perfect. So thank you so much, Vivian. So is there anything you would like to say as a sign off? So how can people, follow up with FoodTechies and the cool stuff that you guys do? Is there any stuff that, how they can follow up with you?
Well, I guess, first of all, you can just go to our website, www.foodtechies.fi. And of course you can, and I think the best thing you can do right now is just join our hackathon. And even if you don't find a team and you don't find an idea and you don't end up actually joining the actual hackathon, just join the community and get to know people and meet people, and come to our networking events. I think we are going to be doing online events even as the restrictions lift, to make the community more accessible internationally to people. And honestly, it's more sustainable. It's not good to constantly have people flying halfway across the world all the time just to meet other people. Right. And in addition to that, we're going to be using the Remo.co platform, which is a 2D virtual networking platform, which will hopefully be a refresher for those people who are a bit zoomed out.
Nice. Excellent, excellent. Thank you so much, Vivian, for answering all of those questions and sharing your insights with the Finnish agri-food ecosystem, and also you got your cool work at the FoodTechies Finland. So thank you so much for everyone joining us today. As I mentioned on the previous webinars as well, you will be able to find the recording of this webinar in our YouTube channel. If you log into YouTube and just type in Kök Projekt, you will find our channel, and you can look to this recording and also the other recordings that we do. And as I mentioned, to get to know all of the stuff that we do and also the other webinars and the reports, you can log into our website, which is kökprojekt.com, and follow up on the stuff that we do as well. So thank you so much, Vivian, again, joining us today. And thank you so much for everyone, and have a nice evening. Take care.
Yep, thank you. Bye.